Today's lesson is Tennis Great Roger Federer Retires. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And today we're going to talk about the world of tennis. Tennis, of course, is a sport in which two players, usually two, sometimes four, hit a ball back and forth over a net, and they try to make their opponent miss the ball. And if the opponent screws up or misses the ball or can't hit it back, then the player who hit the ball gets a point, 15, 30, 40, and then they win the game. But in this particular case, we're talking about Roger Federer, who was a famous tennis player for many, many years, and he finally decided to retire sometime last year, and that's who we're going to talk about today. Helen, were you a big fan of Roger Federer?
Yes, I was. I'm also a big fan of tennis. And we're going to look today not only at the fact that Roger Federer has decided to retire, but we're also going to look at some achievements during his career. Now, Federer was not just a great tennis player. He was also very well liked because he was very graceful and courteous on the court, whereas there have been tennis players in the past who had really bad tempers or threw tantrums, but he hardly ever did that.
Yes, Roger Federer was the perfect gentleman on the court, but he has recently retired, and that's why we're going to talk about him today. So let's get to it. Let's listen to the first part of today's lesson, and then we'll come back to discuss it.
Tennis great Roger Federer retires. On September 15, 2022, Roger Federer announced his retirement from professional tennis. The announcement marked the end of a career that made the 41-year-old Swiss athlete one of the most successful tennis players of all time. Shortly after the announcement, tributes from other greats of the tennis world poured in. "It's been a pleasure, but also an honor and privilege to share all these years with you," tweeted Federer's friend and rival, Rafael Nadal, while women's tennis luminary Billie Jean King called Federer a champion's champion.
大家好，标题中我们可以看到单字 retire， 这个动词指的是退休、退出或是隐退。例如 My grandparents don't work anymore. They retired years ago. 我祖父母不再工作了，他们几年前就退休了。或者 Alice wants to move to the countryside after she retires. Alice 退休后想要搬到乡下去。另外，只要在这个字的字尾加上 ment， 就会变成名词 retirement。例如 Alvin thought he would enjoy retirement, but he actually found it quite boring. Alvin 以为他会很享受退休生活，结果他却感到无聊。又或者说 After retirement, Max plans to spend his time fishing. Max 退休之后计划以钓鱼度日。接下来我们看到名词 privilege， 它的意思是荣幸、荣耀或是特权、特别待遇。举例来说 I had the privilege of working for a boss who was patient and willing to teach me. 我很荣幸能够为一个既有耐心又愿意教我的老板做事。又或者说 Education used to be a privilege instead of a right. 教育曾经是一种特权而非基本人权。再来我们看到单字 rival，这个字是名词，指的是竞争者或是对手。例如 The boxer hopes to beat all of his rivals and become number one in his weight class. 那位拳击手希望能够打败他所有的对手，以成为他那个量级的第一名。或是 With products of such outstanding quality, I genuinely don't think that we have any rivals in this field. 在产品有这么杰出的品质下，我真诚地觉得在这个领域中，我们不会有竞争对手。
On September 15th, 2022, Roger Federer announced his retirement from professional tennis. So, in the title of the lesson, we have the verb retire. To retire means to stop working. especially when you've reached an age where you're supposed to stop working because you're officially too old to work. In many cases, that age is 65. A lot of people, when they reach 65, they retire. Now, the noun form of retire is retirement. So when you are about to retire, you might want some people to know about it, so you make an announcement and you announce your retirement.
Right, and remember, a person who retires is called a retiree, but of course here the condition of being retired is retirement, and he announced his retirement from professional tennis back in September of last year. Now, the announcement marked the end of a career that made the 41-year-old Swiss athlete one of the most successful tennis players of all time. Indeed, Roger Federer has been in the news for many years, not so much in recent years. I think a few years ago he tried to stage a comeback, and he was successful to some degree, but he hadn't really been heard of much over the last year or so. But before that, about 10 years ago, he was storming. He was the top man in tennis.
Yes, and when you think that he's only 41 years old or 41 years old at the time of his announcement, you realize that the career of a tennis player is really quite brief, just as the careers of many athletes are. So in any case, shortly after the announcement of his retirement, tributes from other greats of the tennis world poured in. So when something pours in, it comes through, or it comes in, it arrives in large amounts. People can pour in, or things can pour in. For instance, when Queen Elizabeth died, Queen Elizabeth II, condolences poured in from all parts of the world.
Right, so of course, during a typhoon, sometimes water can pour in from outside if you haven't prepared your house properly. But again, we've got tributes from other famous tennis players, and those tributes poured in. A tribute, of course, is some kind of recognition for respect or honor for somebody. Tributes poured in. Lots of people sent messages saying what a great guy Roger Federer is, and they're going to miss him on the tennis court. We wish him the best of luck, etc., etc. And those tributes poured in. Let's talk about what Rafael Nadal said. He said, "It's been a pleasure, but also an honor and privilege to share all these years with you." And that's what Federer's friend and rival Rafael Nadal tweeted. So here, if you talk about something being a privilege, that means a special situation in which you are allowed to do something that not everybody else is allowed to do. Oftentimes, we describe driving as a privilege and not a right. A lot of people think, I have the right to drive a car. No, it's a privilege. You have to earn it by acquiring the skill and taking the exams and things like that.
Right. It's something that you can consider yourself lucky to have or to be doing. I could also say that it was a privilege to have studied with this famous professor, because not everyone was able to study with this person. So having done so, it was a privilege for me. Now, a few of Federer's fellow tennis players poured in with their tributes, and Nadal said that it was a privilege to share the court with Federer, and he tweeted this. So when you tweet a message, you are basically leaving a message on Twitter, which is a social networking service. And the messages left on Twitter are called tweets. So tweet is both a verb. When you leave a message, you're tweeting. And the message you left is also called a tweet.
And that's what the kind of messages people send on Twitter. They tweet. You can use it as a verb or a noun there. And in any case, yes, that's what Rafael Nadal said. He's from Spain. And then at the same time, women's tennis luminary Billie Jean King called Federer a champion's champion. So if someone is a rival, that means who you play against. Sometimes it can be a friendly rivalry. You play against each other. You're really good. You try to beat each other, but you're still friends, and you realize it's just for the game, so you have a friendly rivalry. But sometimes it can be a really mean rivalry between teams whose fans really hate each other. And if the other team beats them, the losers may riot like they do in some parts of the world.
Yes, but in the case with Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, their rivalry was probably friendly because they're good friends. So they were rivals but friends. Now, Billie Jean King, on the other hand, is a women's tennis luminary. A luminary is a person that is very admired for a particular profession. And indeed, Billie Jean King was active during the 1970s. She was a professional tennis player, and she also was very famous at that time. She has, of course, retired. And that's why she's called a luminary, because she was very, very influential back then in the world of tennis.
Yes, indeed. Her tribute called Federer a champion's champion, which means we have lots of champions in tennis, but he was actually better than all the champions. He was a champion's champion. He was a really great guy and still is. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson today. Let's move on now to the second part.
Federer won his first major singles title at Wimbledon in 2003. Over the next 20 years, he would capture 19 more Grand Slam titles and hold the position of world number 1 for a total of 310 weeks.
So a bit about Federer's career. Federer won his first major singles title at Wimbledon in 2003. So Wimbledon, of course, is a particular area outside of London, and it's famous for its tennis matches that take place every summer. So when people go to Wimbledon and watch tennis games, usually they wear white and they eat strawberries and cream. So it's a very, very special event. And Federer won his first major singles title there in 2003.
Exactly. There are 4 Grand Slam tournaments in tennis: the Australian Open, Wimbledon, the US Open, and the French Open. Not in that order, but in any case, this is quite a big achievement to have won the title at Wimbledon. It was a singles title. Remember, we have singles and doubles. Singles is just one person against another person, and then doubles is 2 people against 2 other people, 2 other players. So yes, indeed, that was his first major title in 2003. And over the next 20 years, he would capture 19 more Grand Slam titles and hold the position of world number 1 for a total of 310 weeks. I remember, yes, Roger Federer couldn't be beat. I was more a fan of Rafael, but Rafael had some problems. I think he worked too hard and got injured quite a bit. But Roger Federer persisted, and he was number 1 for a really, really long time. And again, he got 19 Grand Slam titles, which means he won 19 competitions at the aforementioned places: Australian Open, Wimbledon, the French Open, and the US Open.
Yes, and he held the position of world number 1 for a total of 310 weeks. So for that much time, he was considered the number 1 player in the world. And in the world of tennis, when you call somebody the number 1 player or the best player, you can say that he is seeded number 1. So the word seed, S-E-E-D, is used for ranking tennis players.
Or other teams or players in different sports as well. They're the first seed, they're the second seed, etc., etc. And that's a representative of his success on the court. Okay, let's move on now to the third and final part. We'll listen to it first.
The last 2 years of Federer's career were plagued by knee injuries and operations, presenting challenges to his performance. I've worked hard to return to full competitive form, but I also know my body's capacities and limits, he said. With his athletic artistry and his grace both on and off the court, Federer helped redefine tennis for an entire generation and will be dearly missed by his fans.
第3部分我们看到单字 competitive 这个字是形容词，意思是竞赛的、竞争的或是竞争心强的。举例来说 I like this store because it offers great service at competitive rates. 我喜欢这间店，因为它以具竞争力的价格提供很棒的服务。或是 Lenny is a very competitive tennis player who always has to win every game. Lenny 是个竞争心很强的网球员，总想赢得每场比赛。最后我们看到单字 capacity， 这个字是名词，意思是能力、才能或是容量。例如 Marcus assured us that he has the capacity to complete this tough assignment. Marcus 向我们保证他具备完成这个艰难任务的能力。或是 Kevin got an advanced degree in order to increase his earning capacity. Kevin 取得更高的学位是为了增加赚钱能力。另外这个字也有可容纳人数的意思。例如 This concert hall has a capacity of 1,200 people. 这个音乐厅可容纳1200人。再举一个例子 The hospital has reached capacity, so doctors will have to start turning away patients. 这家医院已到达容纳人数上限，所以医生们得开始拒绝收容病患。
So Federer had a very glorious career, but the last 2 years of Federer's career were plagued by knee injuries and operations, presenting challenges to his performance. So the last 2 years of Federer's career were plagued by these problems. When you are plagued by something, you have a problem for a very long time. It's not just a problem that lasts 1 or 2 days, but it's continuous. And the word plague, this verb is usually used in a passive form. So you could say, for instance, that the company has been plagued with financial troubles for many years.
Right. Plague as a verb, plague as a noun refers to a disease spread over a large area. The plague that killed lots of people in Europe many centuries ago. But in any case, yes, he had trouble with injuries, knee injuries, and operations. And all of that presented challenges to his performance. Indeed, if you're an athlete and you're having physical problems and you need to have surgery or operations, that's going to affect your performance on the court. And he said, I've worked hard to return to full competitive form, but I also know my body's capacities and limits, he said. So yes, he knows he's got these limits, and he knows about his capacities. Indeed, in tennis, you're running all over the court, you're going left and right, so that's going to put a lot of unnatural stress on your joints, especially on your ankles and on your knees. And so he was plagued with knee injuries and had lots of operations. And yes, he had to work hard to return to full competitive form. Competitive means that you're able to compete against other athletes. You're fit, you're well, you're worthy of competing with those other people. You're competitive. You might need to be competitive on the job market too, especially if you're trying to get a high-paying job because there's lots of competition, lots of other competitors who want to be competitive with you.
Yes, and despite his efforts to return to full competitive form, he also realized that his body had certain capacities and limits. So a capacity refers to an ability to do something. I could say, for instance, that after the car accident, Jack has a limited capacity to carry heavy things. So he is not able to carry heavy things as he used to because of the car accident. So his capacity to carry heavy things has been reduced. And because of Federer's injuries, his knee injuries, and perhaps his age as well, his body's capacities have been reduced, and now he has more physical limits.
Right. Sometimes if you're in Taiwan and you go to tourist locations that have suspension bridges, suspension footbridges, they will have a capacity. You'll see a sign that says capacity of 25 people on this bridge. So don't allow too many people on this bridge or it might collapse. But in this particular case, we're talking about his physical capacities. He's aware of what he can do and what he can't do because he's also got some limits. And with his athletic artistry and his grace, both on and off the court, Federer helped redefine tennis for an entire generation and will be dearly missed by his fans. So yes, indeed, we're describing him as having athletic artistry. Athletic, of course, has to do with being an athlete, competing in sports. Athletes compete in all different kinds of sports, in rugby and football and baseball and cricket or whatever. They're all athletes. And if you have athletic artistry, well, you perform very well and you have a special form that everybody recognizes. And indeed, he did have a special serve that only Federer had, and he had special shots that nobody else had. I think he actually was able to hit the ball from behind his back or between his legs, which not a lot of players can do.
Yes, and another aspect of Federer is his grace both on and off the court. So grace refers to a mannerism that you have when you're kind and gentle to other people. You don't get angry very easily, and maybe you move and act in a graceful way. That's the adjective form of grace. And he possessed grace both on and off the court, which basically means that even in real life, in situations when he's not playing tennis, he was still a nice guy. He was graceful, he was kind, considerate, gentle, polite to people.
Indeed, so he will be dearly missed by his competitors and his fans. We wish him the best of luck in his retirement. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Let's listen now to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文一开始提到 Roger Federer 在2022年9月15日宣布从职业网坛退休，这项声明标志着这一位史上最成功的网球选手之一的41岁瑞士运动员职涯的终结。好，那文中它是用到 one of the most successful tennis players of all time 来表达史上最成功的网球选手之一。那么 of all time 表示从古至今，有史以来，其中这个 time 在这边就是指时期啊，或者是时代。Of all time 前面可以搭配使用最高级修饰词。举例来说 He is considered one of the greatest architects of all time 他被视为史上最伟大的建筑师之一。好，那补充一个相关的形容词是all time， 在 all 跟 time 之间是有加连字号的，那这可以形容是史上的、空前的或是创纪录的。像我们说 one of the all-time greats in basketball history 就可以表达篮球史上最伟大的人物之一。那这里的 great 就跟标题里的用法 tennis great 一样，这个 great 是当名词用来表达名人、大人物或者是伟人的意思。好，课文接着写到说，就在声明发布后不久，网球界的其他伟大球员纷纷致上敬意。那文中是用到 tribute 这个名词来表达致敬、敬意。那其实 tribute 它也有贡品啊、贡献等等其他意思。我们来看看它作为字根呢，则是有给予、分配的意思。我们就介绍几个带有 tribute 这个字根的单字。好，第一个介绍的是 contribute， 那它的字首 con 表示一起， tribute 表示贡献、给予。那么一起贡献、一起给予，这样应该可以联想到 contribute 它有捐献啊、做出贡献或者是为什么什么贡献的意思。第二个补充的是 attribute， 它的字首 at 是来自 ad 这个字首，表示朝向。那么 tribute 表示给予、分配。当我们朝着某人或某事物呢，你把功劳或者是过错去分给他，这样应该可以联想到说 attribute 它有归因于什么什么，或是归咎于什么什么的意思。那这个动词呢，也可以表达说将某种特质归属于某人或某事物。好，那么第三个补充的是 distribute， 它的字首 dis 有个别分开的意思。那么 tribute 表示分配、给予。当我们个别分配物品呢，一个一个给，这样也不难联想到说 distribute 它有分配或是分发的意思咯。那最后一个补充的是 retribution， 它的字首 re 表示往回。那么 tribut 这部分来自 tribute 表示分配给予，再加上 ion 是名词字尾。 那我们可以用给予相对应的回报惩处去联想到 retribution， 它有报应严惩的意思咯。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，接着我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Retire.
The boxer retired at a young age to protect himself from head injuries.
Tribute. The bells of the local church were rung in tribute to the town's dead mayor. Privilege. It was a privilege to receive a special tour of the museum from the museum director. Rival. Some people see Pepsi as the main rival of Coke. Competitive. The race for president to be held next year is believed to be very competitive. Capacity. I have no capacity for math, Reggie sighed as he opened his textbook. Athletic. Bianca's athletic skills are so great that she's a star in 3 sports.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. Do you think Federer is the greatest men's tennis player of all time? Why or why not?
As much as I like Federer, I think Rafael Nadal is the greatest men's tennis player of all time because he has a total of 22 Grand Slam titles.
Well, I think another player such as Novak Djokovic is the greatest men's tennis player of all time. I don't think he has as many Grand Slam titles as Federer yet, but he's still quite young and still quite competitive. It's only a matter of time before Djokovic is number 1 forever.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoy reading along with us. I am Helen.
I am Roger.
See you next time.